Hello and welcome to the first in a series of Wales Arts Review film shows in which various editors, critics, writers and authorities on film will be discussing various cinematic experiences, old and new. I'm here, Gary Raymond, editor of Wales Arts Review, with one of our film critics, Graham Taylor, and Eric, who's also an expert on film. We are going to be discussing the cinematic experience that we had just the other day. We went to a Chapter Arts Centre in Cardiff and we saw Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee and John Saxon on the big screen. So first of all, I thought we'd discuss the film is 30 years old, 1973. 1973.
Oh, 30, yeah.
Yeah, so so near enough 30 odd years
Almost
old.
40 years old. 40 years next year.
40 years next year.
Yeah.
Well, maths is a good start.
That's a good
For any
start.
film review, maths is
Pretty
a good
much
start.
you don't need maths to be a film critic.
No, you don't. A calendar might come in handy. I'll get myself a calendar. First of all, seeing a film as frankly as odd as Enter the Dragon, I think we both agree that even though it's quite an immersive experience, when you walk away afterwards after seeing it, we've both seen the film before,
yeah,
but never on the big screen, that it is quite an odd film. It's put together quite strangely. The details of it are quite odd. But what do you think, seeing it on the big screen for the first time? Because I thought from the off, just the look of the film, how colourful it was, the contrasts of the colours of the uniforms with the backdrops of the desert island and the colour schemes of Tokyo, Hong Kong, sorry, at the beginning. So what about the look of the film, first of all, on the experience on the big screen?
I think with a film like Enter the Dragon, you go in to see it on the big screen to see Bruce Lee on the big screen.
Yeah, sure.
And I think the look of the film is complete. What I noticed about it on the big screen was wherever he was in a shot, it was completely about Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
The whole shot is about Bruce Lee. His charisma, his looks, which are usually quite sort of generic kung fu movie looks. You know, they are now.
I mean,
kung
from a Western point of view,
kung fu movies had existed before, and there's a bit of the touch of Zen in it,
yeah.
and there's a bit of the early Bruce Lee films like The Big Boss and Fist of Fury. But he's amazingly charismatic, so much so that you can hardly look at anything else if he's on screen.
Well, I noticed towards the end, the underground fight scene where he just completely decimates all of the extras that are running up to try and
including Jackie Chan.
Including Jackie Chan,
Yeah,
yes, I did notice it.
He cracks Jackie Chan's neck.
Yeah, well, that settles the age-old debate about
who's
winning a fight between Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan.
Yeah.
It is Bruce Lee. It happens.
Bruce Lee.
But you know, the way that scene is filmed in the underground tunnels where he's fighting all of the legions of Han, the supervillain. There's no wide shots. The camera is trained on Bruce Lee the entire time, so that you don't really get a good feel, in a certain sense, of the action of the scene. You just get the movement of Bruce Lee's body.
Absolutely.
A wider shot, you'd have like 4 or 5 henchmen attacking him, and you'd see, you know, a panoramic shot of how the action was taking place. But the camera for the whole 10 minutes of this scene, as he goes through the lair, the underground lair, defeating the henchmen, the camera is just trained on Bruce Lee, and the henchmen that he's fighting are at best periphery. So it enhances that iconographic.
Absolutely, everything goes to Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee doesn't go to anyone. Everyone comes to Bruce Lee for a beating.
Yeah.
Everyone
regrets it.
Yeah, regrets it immediately. He's the centre of Enter the Dragon's universe for the whole thing. Even when he is caught at one point, he just sits down and waits for the head bad guy to come to him.
Yeah.
Bruce Lee doesn't go to anyone.
Jim Kelly's running away from the police.
Jim Kelly is you got to remember, it's 1973. Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song is 2 years old. Shaft is 2 years old. Blaxploitation is brand new.
Yeah.
And so Jim
It's very much a lot of that.
Jim Kelly
his character's on screen,
that.
isn't it?
Is that you got to remember this? This was an American co-production with Shaw Brothers, I think. So they got Saxon in there for the white American audience, and because blaxploitation is massive and kung fu films are massive amongst the blaxploitation crowd in these type of cinemas, exploitation type cinemas, you've got Jim Kelly's character who typically beats up some cops.
Yes.
And has to run away.
Yeah.
He sticks it to the man.
Yes, he certainly does.
You know,
and he even calls him the man at some point.
At some time, yeah, he does call it the man. So that's very much of his time, and very much a storyline that you'd see in like that. That's the sweet back storyline where he's sticking it to the cop.
The storyline, which a lot of people forget, most people just think that Bruce Lee was working undercover and he goes to this island to stop this supervillain.
Yeah.
This kind of, we'll talk about Bond.
There's a bit of British intelligence in it.
There's a little bit of, all of that is very strange. You wonder how the script came together.
Yeah.
They were sat in the script and go, what if we make them British intelligence? Would that apply to the sort of post-Ipcress file sort of British audience?
Absolutely.
And of course, I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but the Bond element. So having the character of the British Secret Service guy who kind of recruits Bruce Lee,
a kind of M
having
character.
a kind of an M character,
Yeah.
it probably was quite important at the time for the
Absolutely.
distribution and the appeal of the film multinationally.
It's strange because it reminded me that the same year Enter the Dragon comes out, just to go back to the blaxploitation element, Live and Let Die comes out. So Bond was very much doing the same thing as Enter the Dragon at the same time, but also Enter the Dragon is very much informed by Bond in the way it's set out. And it's almost a naive look at Bond in the way that Jim Kelly has all the women led in for him.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like Bond.
Well, this is what I mean. We'll go back to Bond in just a second, but the central story of the film is that this Han character, the supervillain, is
very Dr. No.
It's very, extremely Doctor No with the one hand, and the look, just the general look of it.
Absolutely.
But he is involved in obviously illegal. I don't think there's a legal form of sex trafficking.
No.
With sex trafficking, international sending obviously beautiful women around the world to work as prostitutes.
Drugging them first.
Drugging them. Yeah. They find a dead body in the channel between his island and the mainland. So the central thread is supposed to be Bruce Lee goes to stop this man who is involved in multi-million-dollar illegal profiteering from prostitution.
Absolutely.
But the film itself, that central plot is kind of a MacGuffin, really. Absolutely. He could have been involved in anything. It could have been cocaine, or he could have just been.
He could have had a rocket.
He could have had a rocket in a volcano. Exactly. He might as well have done.
Yeah.
And in fact, it might have been better had he had that, because the film, in every other way, is entirely misogynistic.
It is
all of the women in it are just
absolutely
are just there for one of several reasons, either to die or to have sex with.
I think primarily they added to the version that you get on DVD now. There's a lot of philosophy at the beginning, which slows the film down.
Yeah.
And actually, it's a wonderful opening with Bruce Lee sort of teaching. There is a bit of the teaching in the version we had, but it's longer. The speech he has a talk with his master, that's longer, I believe.
It gives his character quite a great deal more authority, doesn't it?
It does.
Rather than he's just... because not only is he talking to his master, and there's a moment at the beginning where the conversation sort of levels out, and his master accepts that they're kind of on equal terms.
Yeah.
But Bruce Lee is also a teacher, because there's that rather odd scenario where he's having tea with the M character, and this young kid just walks up and he just kind of goes, well, excuse me, I just have to give this life lesson to this kid who's walking past. And another very, very strange.
And let's not forget, after all that philosophy build up, the first 10 minutes, he's teaching someone fight not with anger, with feeling, and then about 30 seconds later, he's talking to the M character and suggests that they just go in and shoot Han.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Why don't you just shoot him?
Why don't you just use guns?
But if we could move the film back into sort of a context of early 70s cinema and talk about the Bond thing a little bit more.
Absolutely.
Because the film, especially with the new Skyfall film, just, you know, doing what it's doing at the moment, and sort of completely recasting Bond in many ways. Enter the Dragon is perhaps the best example of a straightforward influence of what Bond had. Obviously, in British cinema, you had like Michael Caine doing his sort of anti-Bond things in the late 60s.
Yes.
With Charlie Palmer character and
Yeah.
but as a straightforward early 70s almost reflection of Bond, Enter the Dragon, with kind of several Bonds. You have the white American Bond, the Oriental Bond, and the Black Bond.
Yeah.
So they're sort of covering their bases. But at the same time, like you said, it very much looks like Live and Let Die. But the greatest comparison is probably with the Bond film that was made directly after it.
Absolutely. As all of Bond films are, there's synthesis of what's going on. And Enter the Dragon is a synthesis of what they feel a Bond film is like. And the very next Bond film that's made is The Man with the Golden Gun, which is almost a complete remake of Enter the Dragon.
Very much, yeah.
You've got a very similar central character, which is a Bond creation anyway, really. So that's hard to say that that's a copy. But you've got a very similar...
It's a copy of a copy.
It's a copy of a copy. You've got Kung Fu for a start that's just chucked in.
Yeah.
Almost willy-nilly, really. It has no real... I don't think it has any real basic storyline to it at all, the Kung Fu. I think he just goes to learn some Kung Fu at some point.
Yeah. Perhaps he's seen Enter the Dragon.
Yeah, he just fancies learning some Kung Fu. I'm not sure it has any relevance. I'm not even sure he actually uses any Kung Fu on the Scaramanga character in The Man with the Golden Gun or Knick Knack. I believe that he just goes, learns some Kung Fu, and then goes and has...
There might be the odd karate chop to...
Yeah.
As he falls out of the ceiling of the boat or
maybe.
something. Yeah.
But it's certainly... And then you've got this chase around Scaramanga's island, and he's got these mirrors, like in the...
Well, the final scene is almost identical, isn't it?
Absolutely. And they start with that at the beginning as well, with another character that turns up to face Scaramanga in his little play.
It kind of sets it up, yeah.
You know, it's strange to see such an incestuous relationship between those films. You can say what you like about Pierce Brosnan, but there's a great scene in GoldenEye, Brosnan's debut, where Judi Dench calls him a sexist, misogynist dinosaur. And it's a brilliant line, brilliantly delivered, brilliant bit of speech. And Brosnan's reaction is perfect. He looks at her as if, one, he doesn't care, and two, he's got to look like, go on, Em, you know you'd like a bit of me. and there's this certain smugness and arrogance that is very much part of the Bond universe for me. And that's got right there. Now what they've tried to do is give him morals, give him some sort of background, which is great. You know, you've got to characterise these characters after a while. But if you start moralising it too much, and start making him feel, one, guilty for sleeping with loads of women and women dying in his wake and killing people, then you haven't got James Bond anymore.
No, exactly. I think
it's
gone as far as it can go with the development of the character.
Absolutely. It's a little bit like a new Star Wars film having Darth Vader in a Fathers for Justice storyline.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for the character.
Maybe Disney will do that.
Maybe Disney will do that. Or Freddy Krueger operating the phones for children in need.
Yeah.
It's not the character.
No.
And it's accused...
I don't think Disney will buy the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise.
But it would be lovely, though.
But there's possibly some...
A daydream on Elm Street.
A daydream on Elm Street. Yeah, that would be nice.
You know.
But, yeah, well, I think that's good. I think we've covered Enter the Dragon, and that it's probably a far better Bond film than Skyfall is.
Absolutely.
Even though Skyfall, I enjoyed Skyfall very much, but
best Bond film for 50 years?
well, it's not Skyfall.
It's not, is it?
No.
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 From Russia with Love.
From Russia with Love, yeah. I've always been a From Russia with Love man. Javier Bardem's excellent, but again,
absolutely,
he's excellent in Bond, but he's excellent in general.
It must be said,
but he is no Robert Shaw.
Judi Dench and Bardem are brilliant in this film.
Yeah.
Daniel Craig is good in this film.
Yeah.
I'm still not convinced I'm watching Bond when I watch Daniel Craig.
Yeah.
I have to say that. I think Casino Royale is a better film than Skyfall.
I tend to think, and the issue with Vesper Lynd in Casino Royale comes from the book. So I'm fine with that bit of character development. It's the things that come after it in the next two films.
Yeah,
I mean, the Quantum of Solace.
The other thing as well you've got to remember, if we're talking about character of Bond, the thing with Vesper is that I suspect that in some of the books, Bond's after very easy, quick women. And Vesper's a very intelligent woman who takes a lot of effort. Bond isn't necessarily a pleasure seeker. He's a pleasure getter. He wants pleasure, he wants thrill, and he wants it immediately. And I don't think if they keep putting politically correct women for Bond to chase, it's not Bond anymore.
Yeah.
Because really what Bond wants is an easy woman. Yeah. Because that's the character he is.
Yeah.
That's the type of man he is. He doesn't want attachments.
He doesn't want a conversation.
He doesn't want a conversation. He's a sexual animal. He's a violent animal. He kills without emotion, which you saw in the early Connery films, like Dr. No and From Russia with Love,
and Casino Royale as well.
And Casino Royale. And if you start giving him all these morals and all this. I think he's quit a few times in these films, hasn't he? Recently, because the script writers write themselves into a corner where they have to suggest, well, if he keeps worrying about this, at some point he's going to give it up.
Yeah.
But that's not a franchise.
It's also not James Bond.
It's also not James Bond, and James Bond didn't last 50 years because James Bond kept quitting because he felt guilty. The film should be about the mission, and then it's done. Which
is exactly what Enter the Dragon is about.
Absolutely.
It's important that you have that backstory for Bruce Lee's character, that his sister is killed by the henchman of Han.
Bob Wall.
It's important that you have that element of the story for his character, but it's not lingered on. And once all the killing is done, there's the close-up on that very strange claw which gets stuck in the tabletop, which for some strange reason, as you mentioned when the film finished, has got some fur on it.
Yeah,
which is just a piece of wood with some spiky metal attached to it to use as a claw, and yet there's some decorative fur on it, which gives a little bit of very, very uncomfortable insight into Han's character.
Yeah.
And he makes this horrible gouging machine and then decides to decorate it with some fur.
It looks
you can see him on his throne, just kind of. He'd need help as well, wouldn't he, to decorate because he's only got one hand.
And I was looking at it, and this is another benefit of watching a film like Enter the Dragon on the big screen. You don't notice these things when you're watching it on the television. And I was thinking, why has he put all that on there? And there's no reason for it. It would still be a deadly weapon without this kind of coarse, hairy look.
Would somebody be off guard because they think, oh, he's just got a very hairy hand?
Maybe.
Oh no, it's a piece of wood with gouging pieces of metal in it.
It would be the most awful looking hand if that was a hairy hand.
And a terrible disguise for
it literally looks like someone's had some Pritt stick, rolled it on a horrible coarse rug, and just left whatever was stuck to it, really.
Yeah.
And should we mention the hat stand?
We should mention the hat stand.
At one point in the film, won't ruin too much about the film. If you haven't seen, you should see Enter the Dragon. Everyone should see Enter the Dragon. Bye, cute dog.
Bye, Eric.
At one point, Bruce Lee decides he wants to break some mirrors. The first mirror he punches really hard and it breaks immediately.
He breaks the mirrors because he's in this hall of mirrors.
Yeah.
And he's having trouble finding out which is his enemy Han and which is his reflection. So he's trying to kill Han and he keeps hitting his reflection. So he decides, well, I'll break all the mirrors and then I'll know.
And
Ingenious.
His second attempt at breaking a mirror is he picks up a coat stand and chucks it at a mirror, but it actually doesn't do anything at all. It bounces off the mirror into a big metal bath.
Into a bathtub. You wonder what Han gets up to in that hall of mirrors. Perhaps he lays in the bath putting horsehair on his gouging
More
killing
prick
hands.
stick, please.
Well, I think with that final image of the claw dug into the table, with bodies of all the henchmen, some of the SWAT team that turn up just to completely destroy the ending for you, and most of the female characters that have been in it, because they all die off screen towards the end.
Yeah. It doesn't spoil anything to know that Bruce Lee is a triumphant
He
character
does all right.
in this
He
film.
does all right. He's quite handy.
You don't watch it really at the end of the day for the story. You watch it for the look, for the timepiece it is. But it is a great thriller, Enter the Dragon.
Well, that's it from the first ever issue of the film show for Wales Arts Review. Next time, I think we're going to be looking at The Shining.
Yes.
Which is being shown on a double bill at Chapter Art Centre with the new documentary about the conspiracy theories surrounding The Shining, Room 237. So, I'm going to look forward to seeing both of those and talking about them afterwards. Goodbye.
Goodbye.